Welcome back to Draven's Den. I'm your host, Stan Miles. I hope everyone had a pretty darn awesome holiday and you came into this new year all bright eyed and bushy tailed and ready to make changes. I read the other day that 26 is the year of the horse, where 25 was the year of the snake. So I guess you can look at it, shed the snake's skin, get on the horse, and ride forward. Well, at least that's what I'm ready to do. I think a lot of us has things in our past that we just want to leave behind in the dust. And no better way to do that than get on the horse and move forward, right? All right, but before we get into anything today, I want to say this up front. Thank you. I truly appreciate each and every one of you that tune in and listen to this show, who have an interest in history, what crazy, wild, and just plain things that kind of brought us to this point today. But, the past wasn't always lived in neat chapters. It was messy, it was uncertain, and most of the time, people had no idea what moment they were stepping in. History's made every day, and I hope each and every one of you make your own history this year. Today's episode is the Weekend Roundup, covering January 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and setting the tone for the week ahead. January always feels strange. The holidays are over, the noise has died down, and suddenly everyone expects life to snap back into focus like nothing just happened. New routines, new goals, new expectations, all overnight. Well, history tells us that never really works. But most turning points didn't begin with clarity. They began with confusion, hesitation, and people quietly trying to figure out what comes next. That's what this show is about. Looking back at those moments, not to judge them, but to understand them. So take a breath, settle in, and let's ease into this week together, shall we? January 3rd quietly carries some heavy historical weight. On January 3rd, 1959, Alaska officially became the 49th U.S. state. What's wild about that isn't just the size, though Alaska is larger than the next three states combined. It's how long it took. The U.S. purchased Alaska from Russia in 1867 for $7.2 million. Can you imagine that, buying a whole state for $7 million? A deal mocked at the time as Seward's Folly. Turns out the guy who bought an icebox accidentally secured oil, natural resources, military positioning, and an entire identity that still feels separate from the rest of the country. History loves to reward patience. January 3rd, 1521, also marks the excommunication of Martin Luther. That wasn't just church drama. That moment cracked open centuries of religious authority and helped launch the Protestant Reformation. One letter, one refusal to back down, and Europe never looked the same again. And in 1961, on January 3rd, the United States officially severed diplomatic relations with Cuba. Cuba. That single move locked in decades of tension, missile crises. I knew I was going to fumble on that one. And frozen politics that still echo today. None of the moments felt historic in real time. They felt administrative, necessary, probably exhausting. Sources here include the National Archives, Library of Congress, and Smithsonian Historical Summaries if you guys want to learn more. Now, January 4th gives us one of my favorite reminders that rules are made up until someone enforces them. On January 4th, 1896, Utah became the 45th U.S. state, but only after agreeing to ban polygamy in its constitution. For decades before that, Utah was repeatedly denied statehood. Same land, same people, different wording. It's a clear example of how power often works in history. Not through force, but through conditions. And 1987, the Reverend Oral Roberts, yeah, you guys remember him, announces, "God will call me home if he doesn't raise $4,500,000 in 3 months." At the end of the 3 months, he declared he had reached his goal, but that God told him he now had to raise a total of $8 million, or I'm going to call you home in 1 year. He was able to raise $9.1 million. Wow. Hey, everybody, I need about $9 million. Just insert reason here. Okay, January 4th, 2007 also gave us the launch of the first Apple iPhone announcement. Not the release, the announcement. And within minutes, technology, journalism, communication habits, and social interactions shifted permanently. Nobody in that room knew they were watching the start of doom scrolling. Then January 5th rolls in with one of the biggest communication moments of all time. 1933, construction began on the Golden Gate Bridge. People thought it was impossible, too wide, too dangerous, too expensive. It took vision, stubbornness, and a willingness to lose sleep, and sometimes lives. In 1998, singer Sonny Bono is killed when he hits a tree while skiing at Heavenly Mountain Resort near South Lake Tahoe, California. After Bono's death, his wife Mary Bono said that Sonny had been addicted to Vicodin and Valium, and that she believed her husband's drug use caused the accident. However, no drugs or alcohol were found in his body in the autopsy. History tends to reward people who hear, "That can't be done," and respond with, "Hold my beer." Let's get into some funny and strange January history. January history has a special flavor, believe it or not. In mid-January 1919, a massive storage tank in Boston's North End burst. Well, in its north end, it burst, releasing 2.3 million gallons of industrial molasses and a deadly 15 to 40 foot high wave. Okay, surfers, get your boards. Yeah, or very large pancakes. The incident, the force of the impact, the wave traveled at roughly 35 miles per hour, demolishing buildings, buckling elevated train tracks, and overturning vehicles. The disaster killed 21 people and injured approximately 150 others. Many victims were suffocated or crushed by the weight of the viscosity of the syrup. A sudden rise in temperature from near freezing to the 40s likely caused the molasses to expand, straining the tank's already weak walls. As the sun set and temperatures dropped, the molasses thickened, trapping survivors in a gooey whirlpool. The tank, owned by United States Industrial Alcohol, USIA, was poorly constructed with steel walls that were too thin. It had leaked since its completion in 1915, to the point where the company had painted it brown to hide the seeping syrup. In the ensuing multi-year lawsuit, one of the first class action suits against the corporation, the court found USIA liable for negligence. The company eventually paid over $600,000 in damages. Yeah, that would be like $600 million now. Safety reform came out of that. The tragedy led to the establishment of stricter construction codes and professional licensing for engineers and architects across the U.S. For decades afterwards, residents reported that the North End still smelled of molasses on hot summer days. Today, the site is a public park. It's called Langone Park, where a small plaque marks the event. People drowned in syrup. Buildings collapsed. Horses got struck. Or stuck. I'm sure they got struck too. Cleanup took weeks, and residents claimed the city smelled like sugar for decades. This is not metaphor. This actually happened. Then there's January 4th, 1965, the day my relative, Winston Churchill, his funeral, was broadcast live on television. It was meant to be a solemn and dignified moment. Unfortunately, multiple cameras caught pigeons relieving themselves on statues mid-ceremony. History does not care about vibes. Not one bit. And finally, in early January 1977, the first documented pet rock shipments went out to customers. People paid money for rocks in boxes with instructions. People will buy anything. All right, quick pause before we close out. If you enjoy this kind of history, especially the stories that don't always make it into textbooks, I want to tell you about my app, Lore Trail. Lore Trail is a GPS-based history discovery app that shows you real historical events tied directly to your physical location. You're not just reading history, you're standing in it. The Lore Trail Kickstarter app is live right now, so you can go over there, search for that, and if you got something you'd like to support me with, even just sharing it is support. The backing, it helps preserve local stories before they disappear completely. You can check it out. kickstarter.com/projects/lore trail. That's LORETRAIL. History is already around you. Lore trail just helps you notice it. Matter of fact, the other day I discovered in the neighborhood I live, there's a small 9-stone cemetery. Dates back to the 1600s. You know, a lot of people in this neighborhood don't even know it's there. And it's called the Golinsville Cemetery. Look it up. One last thing before we wrap up. Well, one more thing before we wrap up. If your family has a story, an immigration journey, a survival story, a strange tradition, or even just a moment you don't want forgotten, I want to hear about it. You can email your family history stories to dravensden@gmail.com. You don't have to write it perfectly. History rarely arrives polished. So that's your reset. You didn't miss anything important this weekend. You didn't fall behind history. You're exactly where you're supposed to be in your chapter. Take what you need from today. Leave the rest. And we'll do it again next time. And like I said, you guys move forward this year. The unfortunate part is, some lives will be lost. The fortunate part is some lives will be born. And it's all going to mark a moment in your timeline. So keep records. Look behind your shoulder at the people that came before you, and learn what you can. Because as I always like to say, having a good grasp on your past gives you a good roadmap to your future. This has been Draven's Den. I'm Stan, and I'll see you next time.